but he speaks for himself and I speak for myself. I think we have to have a Brexit Prime Minister, that we have to have somebody who's bold, who's got vision. You know, this is a big moment in the history of this country. As I see it, there are 3 candidates that supported the Brexit campaign, and I'm not going to damn any one of them by offering my support at this moment in time. But I want it very much to be one of the 3. This is not a moment for business as usual. This is a moment, you know, for radical leadership, for inspiration, and to take advantage, as I've said, of these, unbelievable global opportunities that are there before us. Yes, sir.
Hi, Nigel. Owen Bennett here, Huffington Post. Am I right in thinking that you are therefore going to leave politics? You're not going to form a new party with Aaron Banks or any other sort of people of Eurosceptic persuasion?
I don't know where this, I do like this Banks chat, but I get very bored with these questions. No, I've made it perfectly clear I'm standing aside. You know, I will see out my time in the European Parliament. I will go on co-leading that group in the European Parliament, and I will watch very carefully and very closely, once Article 50, you know, has been triggered, how those negotiations go. And I will continue to support UKIP, a party that, as I said, is in a very good position. We're in a very strong position, a sound position, 1 or 2 reforms that need making, 1 or 2 steps up the party needs. But no, I will go on supporting UKIP, supporting the leadership, and let's see what happens. You know, honestly, if the government does not get a good deal, if it gives in over free movement, if it concedes over this dreadful single market, then I think UKIP's best days have yet to come.
Yes, Gary. Thanks very much. Notwithstanding what you said in answer to the other question about candidates for the Tory leadership, do you see the potential for closer cooperation, wherever that goes, with a Conservative Party that's led by someone you find acceptable over time? Could we be moving in that direction? You don't rule it out?
If there was to be a general election this autumn, I don't think there will be, but if there was a general election this autumn, my own view would be that UKIP should not be wasting resources and talent and energy against people who had the guts to stand up against their own party leaderships and fight for Brexit. So, longer term, depending who becomes the leader, we may see a different kind of politics. And actually, when I said the effects have been seismic, I fully expect within the next couple of years that we're going to see some different parties in British politics. I think the likelihood now that a wing of the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats get together is really quite high. So I know for all of you working in Westminster, you think the last week has been tumultuous. I suspect there's quite a lot more to come. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ben Wright from the BBC. Mr Farage, what sort of role do you envisage UKIP having precisely within the negotiations? Do you think you have to be part of the negotiation team with the EU? And what did you make of Philip Hammond's view this morning that in the end there will have to be some sort of concession on the free movement issue for any sort of access to the single market?
Okay. I think it is desirable that there is a cross-party element to these negotiations because that reflects the vote, that reflects the cross-party nature of the Eurosceptic movement. But even more important than that is that we use people who genuinely understand how Brussels works and who've got extensive networks and contacts, with the German car industry, with French manufacturers or wine producers. That's where the idea that we should approach these negotiations simply as elected politicians from one party meeting in corridors in Brussels is the wrong approach. It needs more breadth, more imagination. So an absolute priority is to bring in business people, but a desirability, and again a message to the country to try and bring people together, to try and make people understand that this is about more than the Conservative Party. They happen to be in government. It's about our country choosing a new course. And, look, I have no idea whether they want to ask me or anybody else in UKIP to be part of this. But we do actually, as a party, have some good knowledge of how Brussels works, and we've got some pretty senior business figures amongst our supporters. Now, as for what deal the government cuts, yes, I understand already we're beginning to hear people saying that actually there's going to be backsliding in these negotiations. 17.5 million people voted very clearly for us to be an independent nation that is not part of the customs union called the single market and without the free movement of people. And I suspect, that what we will do is try and keep the pressure on, but if they do give way, then I repeat the point that as far as UKIP's concerned, for the 2020 elections, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yes, sir, there.
Hi, Nigel, Carl Dinnan from ITV News. What will you do next? Would you like, for example, to be part of the team that negotiates Brexit? And who do you think should be the next leader of UKIP? Douglas Carswell might have a good argument.
That's a terribly good idea. I like that. Look, I repeat the point that we do have the biggest delegation of British MEPs in the European Parliament. We will necessarily be a part of this process, whether it's formally or informally, because much of what is discussed will get debated and voted on in the European Parliament. So we'll do that. If a Brexit government wants to use UKIP or UKIP figures more, and it should think about some Labour people as well, then that will be all to the good. And as far as who should succeed me in UKIP, now I'm going to keep very quiet on that, and may the best man or best woman win.
Yes, sir.
Rob Hutton from Bloomberg. There's been a rather interesting thing that's happened since the referendum victory, which is a lot of the Conservative Party that wanted Brexit have been trying to back away from you as fast as possible and back away from your campaign. I just wondered how you felt about that. They're saying it was nothing to do with you, it was nothing to do with immigration, it was all about sort of Carswellian sovereignty ideas. Do you agree with that?
As I said, I'm not a career politician. That's how career politicians think and speak. They think about the tribe of their party before they think about their conscience or their constituents or their country. And it's a great relief to sit here and, having said, I'm going to take a step aside so actually what will happen now is that in future I won't be constrained when I answer questions like that. The real me will now come out. And they can make it up as much as they want. Look, I repeat the point. There would not have been a referendum without UKIP. There would not have been an effective ground game in the Leave campaign without UKIP's People's Army. And unless we'd taken on some of those issues that many in Westminster or at smart dinner parties in Notting Hill find a little bit tricky, unless we'd taken those on, we would not have got those non-voters to turn out, and that's what made the difference and got us over the line.
Yes, sir. Sorry, behind you.
Nigel, you've still got, sorry, it's Jim Waterson from BuzzFeed News. You've still got at least 2 years to serve as an MEP. Do you intend to serve that out in full and to take part in European proceedings? And during the negotiations, do you intend to try and influence them from within the party and within the Parliament?
Yes, is the answer to that, of course. I mean, there will be a strong UKIP voice in that Parliament during these renegotiations, and if we see significant backsliding or weakness or, frankly, appeasement from the British government, we will certainly say so. And are we going to see out 2 years? Well, I very much hope that the next Prime Minister is somebody who intends to roll their sleeves up and complete the job well within 2 years. And then we will have been, the UKIPers will have been the turkeys that voted for Christmas.
Oh, Marina Hyde from The Guardian. Do you think the tone that you took in the European Parliament last week was a good negotiating tactic that will help us get the best Brexit deal for the UK?
Well, it's probably useful to get a sense of context. I got up to speak after what was, without doubt, the worst event ever in the history of the European Union project. And I was so howled down and shouted down that twice Martin Schulz sprang to my defence. Now, I've never seen this happen before with Mr. Schulz, but it was quite extraordinary, and it showed the fact that they're simply not prepared to listen. They will continue with their political project, which is why it's doomed. So in the face of many catcalls and a huge amount of abuse, they got just a tiny little piece of my mind back. And actually, how should we negotiate? Well, all I will say is that if we start to be weak, if we start to concede in these negotiations, we will get a rotten. The Prime Minister that recognises that actually we've got the trump cards. And we've got the trump cards because we buy a damn sight more from them, you know, than they do from us, and that the opportunity for Brexit actually comes before the German elections and before the French elections. So we need to stand up for ourselves. And some of the arguments I'm hearing, you know, we can't get access to the single market unless we're members, you know, of that single market. And just looking at the figures yesterday, I mean, something like nearly 1.5 trillion euros worth of goods were sold into the Eurozone last year by countries that haven't even got a trade deal. So let's recognise the strength of our negotiating position.
Yes, sir. Andrew Sinclair, BBC East. If we're now going to hear from the real you, can I ask you, what have you made of the various attempts to try to unseat you in the past, and will you now bury the hatchet with Douglas Carswell?
I'll bury the hatchet with anybody. You know, I mean, look, when you lead a political party, and I've been doing this for quite a long time, you know, you necessarily make decisions along the way that not everybody is happy with. You know, your style will not suit everybody. But, you know, I've no desire to do anything other than to fully support the aims of UKIP and the next leader. And as I won't be the person making all the decisions, there'll be less room for falling out with people as well. Well, it may well be. I mean, get down to the bookies if you want, but I wouldn't put too much on it myself if I were you.
Thank you. I'm Ben Glaze, Daily Mirror. Can I just ask what conversations, if any, you've had with either Andrea Leadsom or with Aaron Banks about the Tory leadership? And